Daniel locked his daughter in the basement for 20 years and forced her to give birth to 3 children. What's incredible is that this is a film based on true events. Daniel was the head of the family and a strong man. He would not allow anyone in his family to oppose him. But on this day, his youngest daughter Sarah defies him. She sneaks out of the house in the dark of night to go to a rave with her boyfriend Christopher. By the time Daniel finds out, she was already having fun at the party, listening to Christopher's romantic guitar playing. It was one of the few happy moments Sarah had. Early the next morning, seeing her sent home by Christopher, Daniel was furious, but the rebellious Sarah chose to ignore it. She had had enough of her father's tyranny. She went to her room and told her mother and Lily she was going to travel the world when she turned 18 and leave this stifling home. Daniel, who was outside the door, heard her. He decided to give Sarah a little punishment. He went into the basement and opened the door where he was going to carry out his dark plan. When the other family members left, he pretended to call on Sarah to help him carry the boxes. Sarah did as she was told, but as soon as she had put the boxes down, before she could react, Daniel locked the door. Despite Sarah's repeated cries, Daniel didn't do anything. Sarah opened the suitcase and found it full of her clothes. It was then that she finally realized that something was wrong. So she confessed her mistake to Daniel through a small hole while trying to enter the code to open the door. But Daniel even blocked the hole with a cloth. Now, no sound could come out of Sarah. And at that moment, Sarah's mother had called all of Sarah's friends since she disappeared. But there was no news of her. Even when the police came to the house, they simply asked a few questions and closed the case. 4 days after Sarah was locked in the basement, Daniel reappeared. She pushed him away as he closed the door and prepared to escape. But what she didn't realize was that there was a second door outside the basement. Her actions pissed Daniel off completely. He grabbed her by the hair and went straight back into the chamber. Daniel then told Sarah, "Don't ever press the code, because if you enter the code 3 times wrong, the electricity in the basement will stop and the ventilation fan will stop working. This is your punishment for disobedience." And he told Sarah that she had to trade her body for supplies. When Sarah didn't answer, he slapped Sarah in the face. And the next thing that happened was the last thing anyone wanted to see. On the 7th day of Sarah's incarceration, her boyfriend Christopher approached her, but Daniel told him Sarah had run off with another man. Christopher was left disappointed. As the days went by, it was Sarah's birthday. Daniel brought her a cake and some supplies. Then he handed her a red dress. He asked Sarah to show her gratitude like a tamed animal. He told Sarah that she could make demands of him, but that there was a price to pay. Sarah didn't hesitate to offer to leave, but was rejected outright. Sarah had to get another one. Half an hour later, she was lying on the floor, her eyes vacant as she looked at the clock on the wall. That's what her body had been traded for. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. Sarah's belly had grown and she was about to give birth. She hurriedly looked through the books Daniel had prepared for her and crouched in a corner. She sat on the floor and wailed in pain, but there wasn't a doctor around. Fortunately, with a cry, the baby was born. Looking at her newborn baby, Sarah's face finally broke into a smile. She named her daughter Mary, and Daniel didn't feel any guilt when he saw the baby. Instead, he felt that Sarah should thank him for giving her the right to be a mother. Sarah didn't answer. She looked at the food Daniel had brought her, and there was a fruit knife in it. She picked the fruit knife up and put it down. Clearly, she knew this was her father's way of testing her, and by now she had been successfully tamed. 4 more years passed. Sarah is pregnant again, but Daniel got a promotion and a pay rise. In the evening, the family sat down to dinner in the bright living room. Sarah is still locked in the darkness of the basement. The mother suggests a private detective to find her daughter, but Daniel is furious. Perhaps out of guilt, he brings a TV into the basement. This finally gave mother and son a bit of fun in their dull lives. Little Mary was able to learn about the outside world through the television. Over the years, Sarah's boyfriend hadn't forgotten about her either. One day, he came to Sarah's door and accidentally met her sister Lily. They talked about Sarah. Lily realized that Daniel had been cheating on her, so she told her mother about it. Her mother is furious and gets into an argument with Daniel. Daniel went after her to argue, but accidentally dropped his keys on the sofa. Lily saw this. She picked up the key and went to the basement. Before she could look for it, Daniel came back. He grabbed Lily's keys and scolded her to leave. And so it was. Sarah missed her freedom again. 10 years had passed. Sarah had another child. But as they grew older, their curiosity to explore the world was no longer satisfied by mere television. But Sarah was patient. She would leave her work and play with the children every time. Gradually, After another year, Sarah gave birth to her third child, but there was no room for a fourth in the tiny basement, so Sarah offered to take the youngest child up to raise him. Daniel had to agree, and so the child was quietly placed on the doorstep. The mother saw the letter Sarah had left. She knew Sarah was safe, so she didn't notice the letter underneath the baby. Instead, Daniel found it. As a result, Sarah is again subjected to cruel treatment. Shortly afterwards, Daniel lost his job. After losing his job, he vented exhaust fumes into a secret room with the intention of poisoning Sarah and her 3 children inside. Only his grandson shows up just in time to interrupt his actions. This was the 18th year. He had kept his daughter captive. During this time, Sarah was pregnant with another child. 2 other children were growing up, especially Mary. She looked even better in makeup than Sarah, so she was soon targeted by Daniel. Out of motherly instinct, Sarah warned him not to lay a hand on her daughter, only to have Daniel turn off the vent in retaliation. It's raining hard outside. The rain was seeping through the cracks into the basement. This gave Sarah a chance to get out. She dug an opening with a spoon and used a torch to call for help. This was seen by a neighbor walking his dog, but unfortunately, the neighbor told Daniel about the incident, and this time Daniel punched and kicked Sarah despite her pregnancy. Sarah had a miscarriage. The other 2 children were in the midst of their rebellious adolescence. They blamed it all on Sarah's weakness. They had a big fight, lying on the floor. Sarah recalls her time with Christopher. She finally reveals their origins. The angry son wants justice for his mother, but they've been locked up in the basement for so long. Malnourished, he was no match for Daniel. He was soon beaten by Daniel. It wasn't until 5 years later that things finally turned around. That day Mary had an asthma attack. Sarah begged the bereaved to take her daughter to a doctor and said the words "Daddy" that she hadn't said in over a decade. This seemed to awaken the only conscience left in Daniel's heart. He agreed to the request. Sarah carried her daughter out of the basement. Looking upstairs at the familiar room, her eyes were filled with longing. She decided to take this opportunity to leave. She took her daughter to the hospital. After the doctors performed CPR, her daughter was in no danger. The nurse then handed Daniel a form to fill out. She also asked about Mary's past medical history. Daniel's answers made the nurse suspicious. The nurse made an excuse to leave, but in reality, she was looking for an opportunity to call the police. Sarah didn't miss the opportunity to leave. She inadvertently spilled water on the case sheet. While Daniel was changing the forms, Mary leaves quietly and asks the police for help a short distance away. Daniel reacted and came after her, but it was too late. He was thus brought to justice. The people in the basement were successfully rescued. They were given light and freedom, and Christopher is still in love with Sarah after all these years. They were reunited in the days that followed. He takes Sarah around the world and makes good on his promise. Life is far more frightening than a horror film, and reality is far harsher than a movie. This film is based on a true Austrian event. In reality, the victim was younger than Sarah. She also gave birth to more children than Sarah. But the good news is that the bad guys will eventually get what they deserve.